Hey guys, Mr. Mackey here. Now yesterday we were expanding brackets to try and tidy up some equations, and I set you this challenge where we were given 3 brackets and I wanted you to expand it fully. Remember, we weren't solving these equations, we were just expanding them because there might be some questions where expanding them is needed to solve them. So, let's do it. Now the thing you may not have noticed, which when I told you to look back in the video, were these 2 brackets we expanded in an earlier example. So, let's keep it as 2x minus 1. But when we expanded those 2 brackets as we did earlier, that got us x squared plus 7x plus 12. So all we're now really doing is we're expanding 2 sets of brackets. So let's do it. Let's now multiply our 2x by each of these. So 2x times x squared. Now this won't be a squared bracket answer, this would be a cubed because it's to the power of 3. So 2x times x squared would be 2x cubed. Now let's multiply our 2x by our 7x. So what's 2 times 7? 14. X times x is x squared, so it's plus 14x squared. Now let's multiply 2x by the final one, which is the 12. So what's 2 times 12? 24. Times x, well, we just have one x there, so it would be plus 24x. Now we need to times our negative 1 by each of the values in this. So what is negative 1 times x squared? Well, that would be negative x squared. Now what's our negative 1 times 7x? Well, that would be negative 7x. And finally, negative 1 times 12 would just be negative 12. Now if you got this far, I'll give you a point. But to get the full points, we have to tidy this up because it's a bit long. So we have a 2x cubes here. Are there any other 2x's, any x cubes here? Nope, so we put 2x cubed. We have 14x squared here and we have a negative x squared here, so to put those together. So what's 14x squared minus x squared? That becomes 13x squared. We have a 24x here and a 7x and a negative 7x here. So what's 24 minus 7? That would be 17x. And we have a negative 12 here, but no others, so we put our negative 12 there. So the actual fully expanded answer is 2x cubed plus 13x squared plus 17x minus 12. And that's how we can expand brackets. So over the next 2 videos, we're going to be showing you a new way on how to solve quadratic equations. Now, for this, it's going to be going over 2 separate days, and the first video is I'm going to show you how the method works, and then the second video is how we're going to use that method to actually solve them. Now this method is known as factorising. Now what factorising means is that we split up the 2 parts of the equation that make the equation. So let me give you an example. Let's say I have something such as 5x plus 20. And I want to factorise it. Now when I mean factorising, it means that we'll be putting brackets in, and these brackets can help us separate the equation. So the first question I ask when we look at things that we're factorising is, do each of these values have something in common? Is there something that makes the 5x similar to the 20? Well, if you realise by now that both of these have a multiple of 5 in them, you are absolutely right. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate that 5 from the equation. So let's put a 5 down here. And let's put our brackets because we're taking that 5 out. But it's still part of the equation, it's just been separated, if it makes sense. So now that we've separated that 5, we now need to divide all that by 5 because we're basically, in a sense, getting rid of it. So what is 5x divided by 5? Well, that just becomes x. We have our 20. What's 20 divided by 5? That becomes 4. Do we need to do anything else? No. So we just leave it as that. And that's factorising. These are the 2 factors, 5 and then x plus 4, those two factors, when multiplied together, will get us that equation. And that's what factorising is. Simply finding the factors of equations. So how does that involve quadratic equations? Well, let's try one like this. We have 3x squared plus 2x. And I want to find what do both of these have in common so we can factorise them. So, what do they have in common? Well, they both have x's in them. They both have an x here and an x here. So we take that x out. Now, what's 3x squared divided by x? That becomes 3x. What's 2x divided by x? That becomes 2. And that's it. And how we use that to solve quadratic equations, we'll do that tomorrow. But this is how factorising works. There's loads of different ways to factorise and how factorising can apply for loads of different equations. I'm going to try and do as many as I can today so you can be confident at home. Now, this is one of the trick ones you'd get when a question asks you to factorise this equation. Can you find any factors? No. So what can you do? What must you do if you can't find a factor? Nothing. You just leave it as it is. The only factors that these equations go into are each other. So you just leave it as 2x plus 5. Simple when you think about it. Now this is another example of one of those equations where it doesn't seem so easy at first thought. So we have 4x squared plus 6x. Now what do they both have in common? Well, the first thing I can tell you is they both have x's. So let's do an x here. We do 4x plus 6, because that's what happens when you divide each of those by x. But that's not all we have to do. Can you notice anything else that this now factorised equation has? They both are divisible by 2. So we take the 2 out as well. And that becomes 2x plus 3. But what do we do with the x we took out previously? Well, we still leave it leave it outside like that. So sometimes we may have to take out more than one factor whenever we're factorising. And 2 times x just gets us 2x, so we can just leave it as 2x. But always be aware that even after factorising once, you might have to do it an extra time. Now, before we go on to the next method of factorising, here is a neat little trick that I've picked up whenever I've been a teacher. Now, before I show you the next part, I'm going to ask you a simple question. I need 2 numbers that when added together gets us 3. But when multiplied together gets us 2. Can you think of any numbers that fit that criteria? If you got 1 and 2, you're bang on right. Now, how do we factorise this problem here? Now, it's very similar to what I've just shown you. Firstly, we look at our x squared. Are there any numbers in front of that x squared? No. And because of that, we're just timesing an x and an x together. We're not timesing a 2x, a 3x. We're just timesing an x and an x together. So we know there's going to be 2 brackets because there's going to be 2 different problems. Because remember, when we've expanded them and there's been 2 brackets, we've always ended up with problems like this. So we're going to have an x here and an x here. Now, this is when we go to which 2 numbers add together to get the number in front of the x and multiply together to get the number at the end of the problem. So, we worked out that it was 2 and 1. Does it matter which way we put them in the brackets? No. So you could put a 2 here and a 1 there, or you could put the 1 there and the 2 there. It doesn't matter. But when you then expand those brackets, you will get that. And that's how we factorise quadratic problems. Whenever we factorise problems like this, that's how you do it. Let me show you another example, just so we're on the same page. So let's factorise this problem. Now, firstly, because we have an x squared, we're timesing 2 x's together. We put an x here and an x here. Now, we need 2 numbers that add together to get 6 and multiply together to get 8. So there's 1 and 8. They multiply together to get 8. But do they add together to get 6? No, they don't. They add together to get 9. Then we have, well, the only other ones I can think of are 2 and 4. They multiply together to get 8. 2 and 4 added together gets us 6. So we put those in these brackets. Does it matter which order we put them in? No. So that would be x plus 4, x plus 2. Simple as. Now this one's a bit trickier. The x squared is still no different. We put our x here and our x here. Now, because we have a negative where we're meant to be finding two numbers that add together, but a positive when we're finding two numbers when multiplied together, what we can conclude is that the two numbers we're looking for will be negative numbers. Because remember, when we multiply two negatives together, they will always end up with a positive. So we know that in these brackets there will be negatives. So what negative numbers, when added together, gets us negative 5, but when multiplied together gets us a positive 6? Well, in a 6 times table, there's 1 and 6. So negative 1 and negative 6, that gets us negative 7. It's not the same. What about negative 2 and negative 3? Well, that multiplied together gets us 6. Negative 2 add negative 3 will get us negative 5. Doesn't matter which order in the brackets? No. So it's negative 2, negative 3, and that's how we factorise with two negatives. What about one like this? Well, before we do, so we first do our x squared as per usual. Our x squared is still x squared, so we have an x here and an x here. Now here's another rule. If when we're adding two numbers together, there's a positive, but when we're multiplying the two numbers together, it's negative, we are using a positive number and a negative number in this. So we've got to think a bit more outside the box. So we need to find two numbers that when multiplied together gets us negative 10, but when added together gets you a positive 3. So let's do 1 and 10 firstly. So negative 1 times 10 gets us negative 10. Fantastic. But what's 10 and negative 1? That gets us 9. Is that the same? No, so can't be those. You could also try it with negative 10 and 1, but when you add them together you get negative 9. Doesn't match. Are there any other factors of 10 that we can think about? What about 5 and 2? Well, negative 5 times 2 gets us negative 10. Brilliant. But what? So then when we add negative 5 and 2 together, that gives you negative 3. Is that the same? No. But what about 5 and negative 2? They make negative 10. When added together, they get positive 3. It's basically a process of elimination, guys, when at the end of the day. So the answer is x plus 5, positive 5, and x minus 2, negative 2. Because when you multiply them, you will get a negative answer. But when you add them, you will get a positive answer. It's easy when you think about it. You just need to do that process of elimination, like I said. Now, this is a hard one. It looks quite challenging, doesn't it? And that's your challenge for tonight. I want you to factorise this equation. But I will give you a clue, okay? X squared minus 9 is the exact same as x squared plus 0x minus 9. So for this you need to find two numbers that when multiplied together gets you a negative, but when added together gets you 0. It's quite easy when you think about it. But that is your challenge for tonight. Good luck with this. And tomorrow, we're going to be using the factorising knowledge we've picked up to solve actual problems, to solve and find x. We're finally doing some solving, guys. About time. Thank you so much for all the support I've had to my channel so far. It's been amazing. Algebra is one of my favourite topics, and I hope that in a few weeks' time I'll do another week on algebra. Next week is focusing solely on number questions. So the first 3 days will be percentages, then the next couple of days from that will be negative numbers, and the next couple of days from that will be factors. Lowest common factors, highest common factors, lowest common multiples. Always got them mixed up there. Shows how tired I am. So, good luck with this problem. Let's keep learning and have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow, guys.